or on long flights, if you're saying going to Mars, how can we do that more effectively? And a guy came up with some flour. I know some people will cringe at this, but the flour's made from insect and mealworms and things like that. So he crushed up these insects and made a flour from them and 3D printed them, extruded them. And then he thought, I wonder whether this could help the world food hunger thing. So now he's looking at that. He actually made it open source so more people can look into it and try and develop it faster. And it's about making or printing food that has quite specific nutrition for, say, children that are starving in countries. So it's quite an interesting thought. Who showed me a weird... You showed me a weird food thing before we started, actually. Yeah, we'll go to Rachel, if she can find it. While she's filling in, I'll tell you a story that I read today. So somebody has purified carrots, because they said old people struggle eating carrots because they're too hard on their dentures. And so they purified carrots and then printed them out to look like carrots. Weird thing to do. So it was purified texture. It was still a carrot, but they didn't have that hard texture. And because people didn't really want to eat purified food, they said it looked like baby food, so can we print it to look more like the original food it started with? So I thought that was quite interesting. That's just a filling in gap. Do I need to think of something else while you're waiting? Oh, okay. So Israeli scientists developed 3D printing technology for nutritious and tasty personalised food. It looks like a brain on there,
You can see how it starts. They start with an introduction to a biblical tale. Excuse me. As the biblical tale goes, during an extensive 40-year travel through the Sinai desert, ancient Israelites preserved, with the help of manna in the book of Exodus, this mysterious substance, which is said to have been sent from God to ensure the survival of the people, and is described as similar to coriander seed. Now, researchers from Yism Research Development Company of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem have developed a 3D printing process based on nanocellulose, a unique material that is drawing comparisons to the religiously significant manna. And it goes on about this nanocellulose, and apparently it's calorie-free and offers a healthy and nutritional way to create a variety of
Quick,
meals.
show me that diet. Yeah. Yeah, it's weird stuff. I mean, show of hands, would you, in this room, who would eat printed food?
If it looks like that.
Okay, quite a lot of you, cool, okay. Just seeing if my husband put his hand up. No, I don't think so. Vegetarian, all the same, I'm not sure. I mean, there's lots of safety aspects. Printed food is actually not legal. You can't sell on printed food. Yes, there's a man just going,
I know you said no, but it is. There's a company in Birmingham called Cadger's Magic Candy Factory who sell 3D printed sweets.
Yeah, I'm thinking more of the meat.
Like food grade.
Yeah. Food stuff. Yeah. I've seen the 3D printed chocolate and stuff like that, and 3D printing came into its own for ornate designs for cakes and things like that. But they don't have the health and safety rules for printing whole dinners, if you like. They can print it, and you can say yes to eating it, but you can't sell it like that. As a non-AM person, what do you think about eating printed food?
Well, I'm a very bad cook, so it's fine with me, basically. But on the question of whether it can solve world hunger, I mean, the short answer is no, frankly, because the problems with world hunger are not food production problems at all. They're supply problems, they're raw materials problems. We have loads of food going uneaten in supermarket bins, in food mountains, and we've had this problem for 40 years, at least. You know, the problems, maybe if we can make more generic foodstuffs, that's something that AM can help with. Particularly this issue of eating insects. One of the things that keeps coming up in these proposals about how we're going to solve world hunger is, well, there's lots of good nutrition in an insect, but nobody wants to eat insects. Some people may have tried this. I actually haven't. I'm a coward. But some people, you may have had experiences of trying this. Generally, the reports are pretty bad of eating fried insect. But you powder it and you make it look like a carrot or a cake. Suddenly, some of the phenomenological revulsion goes away and it's palatable again, provided it doesn't taste like insect, which, it's not hard to add some E numbers to powdered insect, I'm sure. But equally, the rival technology, I suppose, is hydroponics, the kind of vat-grown foods. There's no reason to think that AM has massive advantages over that, or perhaps you can say there is, but the problems here are not technological problems, they are economic.
Yeah, of course you can.
I was going to say, on the printing of food, actually, sometimes I think, what's the point in using 3D printing? So the carrot example is great, and I can see the point behind making something that's purified and looks like a carrot, but then I could just as easily stick it in a jelly mold type thing and make a carrot shape. So I think some of the examples that we see of these things, it's like, yeah, it's great if you can make food from insects and solve a problem with that, but is there a need to then extrude it and 3D print it? Possibly not. Possibly it's a bit of a gimmick. Possibly there's some aesthetic aspects, but do I care if I'm starving in some far-flung part of the world what it looks like?
I think
the guy who developed this was more of a dial-up recipe, if you like, for specific areas. If somebody needed a certain nutrition, but in small packages, easy to ship, I think that's what they're looking at, really. So bespoke. So we say, okay, we've got this patient, it needs this dietary requirement, so we're going to dial in this recipe, and sort of more that aspect. I mean, it's. I was just about to say it's food for thought, but well, it's food for thought. It is. It's odd. Has anybody else got anything to add? Okay.
So there is a company over in the States called Organova who print, they're the ones that are going to be printing liver tissue, if you've seen that in the news. So they're not trying to print full livers, they're trying to print samples of livers that can then be used for drug testing, for example. And they also set up a spin-out company, because liver tissue is essentially meat at the end of the day. So they started trying to look at whether you could print meat that we could eat. And they also set up another spin-out company, because they were really going hard. Leather is the future, 3D printed leather. Now, the meat one's really interesting, because I'm sure many of you have seen this kind of Impossible Burger, the whole thing towards vegan, plant-based diets, that thing. If we can use 3D printing to create cell structures that are representative of what's in meat, then actually we're getting closer to being able to create foodstuff like we know. I've had the privilege of trying some of the 3D printed food. It was absolutely atrocious. It was, there was a pasta, there was some cheese, and there was some chocolate. And all of it had been heated for about 3 hours and then slowly extruded over a hot plate and then allowed to congeal. And I mean, it was awful. And anybody who's made chocolate knows you temper chocolate to get it nice and crisp. You don't heat it over a hot plate for 4 hours. So, I'm not convinced what we've got at the moment is the answer, but there are technologies in development that really could be. And when we start to combine them with the stuff that we've got going on in pharmaceutical printing or bioprinting, I think we could be getting something interesting. Will it solve world hunger? I don't know. Will it at least minimise our CO2 emissions? Quite possibly.
Okay, good. Nicely into my next question as well. It's almost like you knew what I was going to say. So what we talked, Sophie mentioned about printing liver tissue and printing of medicines. So what are the ethical aspects of 3D printing? So we've seen these printing of organs, sort of human enhancement, stuff like that. Could it be used by the military untoward reasons? What are the safety concerns? So these are often cells that have been taken from your own body and 3D printed. So how do you test that it's safe? Do we take a whole bunch of people who are saying, yeah, I'm willing to look at that? Have you got any thoughts about the ethical aspects of 3D printing?
That's a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So let's start with the medical one first, because while there are some thorny issues in medical ethics, the majority of medical ethics questions are actually really simple. They come down to, is this going to make somebody's life better? Are 3D printed organs going to make people's lives better? If yes, then do it, and do it as cheaply and as quickly as possible. Obviously there needs to be oversight, but also somebody's got to be the first one to try any medical procedure. Those issues apply any time that you bring a new technology into medicine. And you know, the organ transplant supply is never as good as we would like it to be. Although actually, I suppose, given that most of our transplants come from people dying, maybe we don't want the supply to be good. Now that I think about it, poor choice of phrase. The point really is that if we can source more organs that are better suited, you know, if people can take a tissue sample from you and grow an organ that has all the right transplant markers for you already, then there's no worry about rejection, which is a huge issue in transplants. And you know, generally speaking, just get on with it. What are you waiting for?
So with that, so it comes from you, so you're not going to reject it. What's the outlook if somebody says, well, I can smoke 60 fags a day, I can drink, and because I can just print myself a new organ, it doesn't really matter. Do we sort of devalue what life is and what it is to be human, do you think?
Well, what is it to be human, right? A philosopher's question, sorry. I suppose the question there, it becomes more purely one of economic responsibility. Are you allowed to live a life that imposes great costs on the NHS? And we see a huge amount of kind of press effort, really, popular culture effort, and stigmatising certain ways of life because allegedly they put costs on the NHS that wouldn't be there otherwise, costs on the health system that wouldn't be there otherwise. We can, I think we can be sceptical of all of those things, but equally, if you are going to indulge yourself to an early grave and then fix it with 3D printing, we'd better be taxing those cigarettes enough to pay for your replacement organs.
I think that was my point really. Would it be available for everyone or only for the rich? And we're seeing, you know, the rich and poor divide becoming more, you know, widened as the years go on. Would, you know, additive manufacturing allow that to happen for, you know, personalised medicine and organs?
I suppose this isn't, I don't think this is an additive manufacturing question. It's a politics question, really. I think it goes for every medical technology. You know, I have a private health provider for some treatment that I'm receiving because the wait lists on the NHS are horrendous for it. I'm able to afford that because I have a lecturing job and, okay, the pay's not great, but it's all right. I don't have many living costs. But I think when we look at situations like that, the problems generally aren't individual, right? They're problems of government structures, state-level structures and international structures that account for, well, why is the NHS tight for money? Government's not funding it. Very simple. I don't, you know, perhaps additive manufacturing is going to create some situations that don't already exist. Is it going to change the balance of power? Probably not. Again, if there's a theme emerging from what I'm saying here, it's that this revolution isn't that revolutionary from a political or a material conditions standpoint.
I'd agree.
And
Yeah, of course you can. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really interesting having a philosopher here. I feel like I'm learning lots, actually. So I wondered with something you said, Kate. You said, does it mean that we can let people go off living their lives of debauchery and whatever, and then fixing it? But there's possibly also a difficulty there that if people don't understand the limitations of it, maybe they do think that.
Yes.
And maybe they do think, oh, I can do all this crazy stuff and I don't have to care about how I live. And I know my doctor said do this, this and this, but it doesn't matter because,
It's in the future,
hey,
that will-
yeah, if I get sick, I'll just, I don't know, 3D print myself an entire new body, transplant my brain and all my thoughts and memories into it and fix it. So there's almost both sides of it, and that side of what if people think it can do way more than it actually can do.
And I think it goes back to that question that you were saying, you know, it's there's a lot of hype about 3D printing and we need to kind of temper that slightly. It has helped us get research and get our ideas out there, but we need to kind of tame the madness, if you like, because it's not always helpful. Rachel, you got anything to say, Ed?
Not necessarily on the medical side of things, although it does touch on that, but I think it comes down to this whole personal approach, distributed manufacturing thing, and I think that has been overhyped, and it is about keeping things real. Again, defence distributed is probably your best example of hyping what can and can't be done on a personal level. Some of you may have heard of a young man called Cody Wilson, who distributed the STL file for a 3D printed gun, and it went mad. The press went mad with it, even the mainstream media press went mad with it. The reality of the situation is that yes, he fired one, and in my opinion he was very lucky that he didn't die, because anybody that fires a 3D printed gun is more likely to damage themselves than anybody else. But there's a whole, there is a massive ethical issue around what can be printed in a distributed manufacturing model and what needs to be kept regulated. In my opinion, firearms is one of the big things that does need to stay regulated, along with medical and probably aerospace and automotive. But then there are other consumer products that, yes, people can make themselves. Most people won't, as we touched on earlier, but there are a lot of people that want to, and they should be allowed to.
So what about companies' IP issues, wanting to retain, there's a whole field out there, isn't there, really, where we need to look at the laws and regulations. Sophie, do you want to add anything?
Well, it was just to come back to the medical thing, and I don't think for a second we're going to be printing replacement livers anytime soon. So I think that's kind of a hypothetical question at the moment. What I do think is really on the horizon is enhancements to your body that can be 3D printed. So if you think about, come back to the hearing aids, the titanium hearing aids that exist today are, they can go ridiculously deep into your ear canal, so you'll never see them. They can detect up to 10 different sounds, they can sort out which of those sounds you want to hear. They're ridiculous, they'll connect to your phone, and then you start to think, hang on, I want a hearing aid. And then we start to look at implants. Okay, well maybe you want your bones to be stronger than they currently are. We could probably print out bones today and implant them. And all of these different things that weren't possible because of 3D printing and that ability to create products from your scan data really easily. We're starting to move into that area of enhancements beyond the usual cosmetic enhancements into functional enhancements that people are going to want, and that really raises ethical questions, I feel, about whether we should be doing this, because we are creating Wolverines, maybe.
So the great underlying issue when we worry about enhancements is that we're doing something unnatural, right? So to respond to that, I would ask, what is the value of something's being natural? And there is a philosophical paradox here, because on the one hand, in some sense, human beings are living creatures, we are part of nature. At what point does what we do stop being natural? And one view is to say, well, the things that human beings do are natural because we are natural creatures. So it doesn't. There isn't an issue of this becoming unnatural. Everything is natural. This is kind of the view I take. Natural is kind of a meaningless word. The other way to go is to say, no, there's a hard dividing line between some things that like ordinary living creatures other than humans do, or humans also do, and those are natural, and then there are things humans do that aren't natural. But then you have an interesting problem, which is that when we start to talk about the things that we do that we consider natural, when we use the language of nature, we're usually talking about bad things. When we talk about human nature, we're not usually saying something positive. Yeah? Human nature, we think, is our bad side, and our kind of paradigm of what nature is. It's about competition and ruthlessness, and we think of nature sometimes as very beautiful, but actually when you look at it close up, it's just dirt and stuff killing stuff, basically. So if you want to draw that hard and fast design, then all the good stuff that we think human beings do is on the non-natural side. So either everything is natural and there isn't a problem of kind of interfering with nature or messing with nature in some problematic way, or the things that we do that aren't natural are the things that we should celebrate doing, so let's go for it. The only exception to this is if you have a religious faith and you think that God has ordained a certain way for us to be that is the natural way for us to be. And I don't want to say that position isn't subject to this paradox. It might be subject to other issues, but it's not subject to this paradox. That's a legitimate stance to take. If you want to be secular about this, then are we doing something unnatural? That's not the question to ask. The question of enhancement is the same as the question with all of the medical stuff, is who's going to get it? Are we going to see, in the extreme case, we're talking about a speciation of some sort of division of the enhanced humans from the non-enhanced humans, which is a very popular idea in science fiction, but probably is not something that we're going to have to worry about very much in our lifetimes. Certainly not from biological enhancements. We already have to worry about it in technology. You probably all have smartphones about your person that probably people in the third world can't afford, or lots of people in the third world can't afford. That is a division that works on exactly these lines, but it's not a 3D printing problem. Sorry, I realise I'm monopolising that one.
Very good, yeah. Okay, so I'm just looking at time. So I think we're going to finish off with our final, just a quick summary from everybody, is, so what do you think the future of 3D printing is going to be? Do you want to start, Candice? Or should I? Yeah?
I'm still hung up on the Wolverine idea. Although we're nowhere near that, I do kind of want to see it.
Like Hugh Jackman.
I mean, I don't care, I'm a very happily married woman.